Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nastafreshu abhadreshu nityam. Nastafreshu abhadreshu nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki. By regular attendance in the Bhagavatam class, and hearing service unto the pure devotee, his troublesome to heart is almost completely destroyed. Loving service unto the glorious Lord comes into song, comes into being established with clear vocal effect. Timarandasya janam janam shalakaya chakshuram militam jena tasmai shri gurave namaha. Born in the darkness of ignorance, my spiritual master, my eyes are the torchlight of knowledge, and my humble obeisances unto him. Mukam karoti vachalam pangam langa yate girim yat kripatam ahammade shri guru vinatadanam. So today we are reading Canto 9, Chapter 1, verses 1 through 22. So you just read the English and then just the Sanskrit.
So we'll read the translation only one by one, and then we'll recite one word. I think that's it.
Yeah. And you take turns reading the verses?
Yes.
Okay.
King Parikshit said, "My lord, Sukadeva Goswami, you have elaborated and described all the periods of the various manus, and within those periods, the wonderful activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has unlimited potency. I am fortunate to have heard all of this from you."
Satyavrata, the saintly king of Dravid Desha, who received spiritual knowledge at the end of the last millennium by the grace of the Supreme, later became Vaivasvata Manu, son of Vaivasman, in the next Manvantara period of Manu. I have received this knowledge from you. I also understand that such kings as Ikshvaku were his sons, as you have already explained. Vishesh?
O greatly fortunate Sukadeva Goswami, O great Brahmana, kindly describe to us separately the dynasties and characteristics of all those kings, for you are always eager to hear such topics from me.
Kindly tell us about the abilities of the celebrated kings born in the dynasty of Vaivasvata Manu, including those who have already passed, those who may appear in the future, and those who exist at present.
Suta Goswami said, when Sukadeva Goswami, the greatest knower of religious principles, was thus requested by Parikshit Maharaj in the assembly of all scholars learned in Vedic knowledge, he then proceeded to speak.
Sukadeva Goswami continued, "O king, subduer of your enemies, now hear from me in great detail about the dynasty of Manu. I shall explain as much as possible, although one could not say everything about it, even in hundreds of years.
The transcendental Supreme Person, the super soul of all living entities, who are in different statuses of life, high and low, existed at the end of the millennium, when neither this manifested cosmos nor anything else but him existed.
O King Parikshit, from the navel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead was generated a golden lotus, on which the four-faced Lord Brahma took his birth.
From the mind of Lord Brahma, Marichi took birth. From the semen of Marichi, Kashyapa appeared. And from Kashyapa, by the womb of Daksha's daughter Diti, Vivaswan took birth.
Okay, best of the Partha dynasty. From Vivasvat, by the womb of Samya, Shraddadeva Manu was born. Shraddadeva Manu, having conquered his senses, begot 10 sons in the womb of his wife, Shraddha. The names of these sons were Ishvaku, Driga, Sharyati, Dishta, Karushaka, Narishyanda, Prashada, Navaga, and Kavi.
Manu at first had no sons. Therefore, in order to get a son for him, the great saint Vasishtha who is very powerful in spiritual knowledge, performed the sacrifice to satisfy the demigods.
During that sacrifice, Shraddha, Manu's wife, who was observing the vow of subsisting only by drinking milk, approached the priest offering the sacrifice, offered obeisances to him, and begged for a daughter.
Told by the chief priest, now offer oblations, the person in charge of oblations to clarify whether to offer. He then remembered the request of Manu's wife and performed the sacrifice by chanting the word Vasat.
Manu had begun that sacrifice for the sake of getting a son, but because the priest was diverted by the request of Manu's wife, a daughter named Ila was born. Upon seeing the daughter, Manu was not very satisfied. Thus he spoke to his guru, Vasishtha, as follows.
My Lord, all of you are expert in sharing the reasons. How then has the result been opposite to one desired? This is a matter for lamentation. There should not have been such a reversal of the results already considered.
You are all self-controlled, well-balanced in mind and aware of the absolute truth. And because of austerities and penances, you are completely cleansed from all wicked contamination. Your words are like those of the demigods. Your words like those of the demigods are never baffled. Then how is it possible that your determination is failed?
The most powerful great-grandfather, Vasishtha, after hearing these words of Manu, understood the discrepancy on the part of the priest. Thus he spoke as follows to the son of the son.
This discrepancy in objective due to your priest's deviation from the original purpose. However, my own words I shall give you a good son.
Sukdev Goswami said, O King Parikshit, after the most famous and powerful Vasishtha made this decision, he offered prayers to the Supreme Person, Vishnu, to transform Ila into a male.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Controller, being
No, 22.
the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Controller, being pleased with Vasishtha, gave him the benediction he desired. Thus, Ila was transformed into a very fine male named Satyumna.
So text 17. Bhagavan kim idam jatam karmavo brahmavadinam viparyayam ahoshatam maivam shad brahmavikriya Bhagavan kimidam jatam karmavo ramavadinam viparya yamaho shatam maivam shad brahmavikriya Bhagavan kimidam jatam karmavo brahmavadinam viparya yamaho shatam maivam shad brahmavikriya
Bhagavan kim idam jatam
Bhagavan kimidam jatam
Karmavo brahmavadinam
karmavo brahmavadinam viparyayam mahokastam
Maivam Shad Brahmavikriya.
maivam shad brahmavikriya
Bhagavan kim idam jatam
Bhagavan kimidam jatam
Karmavo brahmavadinam
karmavo brahmavadinam
viparyam ahokasham
viparyayam mahokastam
Maivam Shad Brahmavikriya.
maivam shad brahmavikriya Bhagavan kimidam jatam
Karmavo brahmavadinam
karmavo brahmavadinam viparyam mahokastam
Maivam Syad Brahmavikriya.
maivam shad brahmavikriya
Bhagavan kim idam
jatam.
Bhagavan kim idam jatam. Karmaho brahmavadinam.
Karmaho Ramavandinam.
Viparyayamaho kashtam.
Viparyayamaho kastam.
Maivam syad brahma vikriya.
Maivam shad Brahma Vikriya.
Bhagavan kim idam jatam.
Bhagavan kim idam jatam. Karma Brahmavandinam.
Viprayayam ahokastam.
Viparyayam mahokastam.
Maivam shad brahma vikriya.
Maivam shad Brahma Vikriya. Bhagavan, O my Lord, Kim Midam, what is this? Jatam, born. Karma, fruit of activities. Va, all of you. Brahmavadinam, of you who are expert in chanting Vedic mantras. Viparyayam, deviation. Oho, alas. Kastam, painful. Mam evam shat. Thus it should not have been. Brahmavikriya, this opposite action of the Vedic mantras. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. My Lord, all of you are expert in chanting the Vedic mantras. How then has the result been opposite to the one desired? This is a matter for lamentation. There should not have been such a reversal of the results of the Vedic mantras. Please repeat. O my Lord, all of you are expert in chanting the Vedic mantras. How then has the result been the opposite of the one desired? This is a matter for lamentation. There should not have been such a reversal of the results of Vedic mantras. Purport. In this age, the performance of yajna has been forbidden because no one can properly chant the Vedic mantras. If the Vedic mantras are chanted properly, the desire for which the sacrifice is performed must be successful. Therefore, the Hare Krishna chant is called the Maha Mantra, the great exalted mantra above all other Vedic mantras, because simply chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra brings so many beneficial effects, as explained by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shikshastaka 1. Cheto darpanam marjanam ahamahadavagni nirvapanam Shaya Kairava Chandrakavaranam Vijavadu Jivanam Anandandam Vadivardhanam Pratipratam Purnam Ritasvadanam Sarvatmasnapanam Puram Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to fully taste nectar for which we are always anxious. Therefore, the best performance of yajna given to us is the Sankirtan yajna. Yagnai Sankirtana Prayer Yajantihi Sumedasa. Bhagavatam 11:5-32. Those who are intelligent take advantage of the greatest yajna in this age by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra in congregation. When the Hare Krishna mantra is chanted by many men together, the chanting is called Sankirtan. And as a result of such a yajna, there will be clouds in the sky. Yagnat bhavati parjanya. In these days of drought, people can gain relief from scarcity of rain and food by the simple method of the Hare Krishna yajna. Indeed, this can relieve all of human society. At present, there are droughts throughout Europe and America, and people are suffering. But if people take this Krishna consciousness movement seriously, if they stop their sinful activities and chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, all their problems will be solved without difficulty. In other processes of yajna, there are difficulties because there are no learned scholars who can chant the mantras perfectly well, nor is it possible to secure the ingredients to perform yajna. Because human society is poverty-stricken and men are devoid of Vedic knowledge and the power to chant the Vedic mantras, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is the only shelter. People should be intelligent enough to chant it. Yagnai sankirtanai prayer yajantihi samedasa. Those whose brains are dull cannot understand this chanting, nor can they take to it. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityamani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvashesha Sunyavadi Pashtachadesha Tarane. So, the context of the Srimad Bhagavatam is Parikshit Maharaj has been cursed to leave his body in 7 days, and we're in chapter 9, so he's 3/4 of the way through the Bhagavatam, and time is ticking. Time is ticking, they say. And it's interesting in different places in the Bhagavatam, we have descriptions of different dynasties, and there's lists sometimes of many names, or sometimes many verses in a row are listing all these dynasties. And sometimes you might wonder, well, Maharaj Parikshit, he has a limited time, and so why are we hearing all these names of all these dynasties? Why? Because there's such a short time there. Why doesn't he just cut to the quick and just want to hear about Krishna's pastimes? But Srila Prabhupada wants to describe that you should not skip over one word in Srimad Bhagavatam, because everything there is very important. So even though there may be a list of names of all these different dynasties, those individuals are somehow connected to someone who's connected to someone who's connected to someone. Many connections down the line are actually connected to Krishna and Krishna's dynasty. So we're actually getting purified just by hearing the names of these individuals who have even some seemingly remote connection with Krishna. So Srimad Bhagavatam has very great spiritual potency. And Srila Prabhupada, he's describing in this verse how potent the Vedic mantras were when properly chanted. And the Vedic mantras were very powerful. The qualified Brahmins, they could ignite a fire simply by mantra. Simply by mantra. Who can do that in this age? Nobody. It's just, so there's no one qualified to do that. But at the same time, those mantras had great efficacy. And actually, during the Second World War and even before, the Germans actually were very interested in Vedic culture. Actually, the Germans and even the English, they tried to claim credit for the Vedic culture, saying that actually the Aryan race actually came from Germany. They were trying to claim the credit. And the Germans were also interested because they understood from their study of the Vedic literatures that they had this powerful weapons, the Brahmastras, and they were trying to understand, well, can we make some weapons like that? So they were interested in that. Srila Prabhupada gave a very interesting lecture at Rupa Goswami's Samadhi. It was in his discourses on nectar devotion. And there he was describing how the different Kshatriyas, they would invoke mantras to release their Brahmastras. I'm sure everyone here has read either Ramayana or Mahabharata, and even if you didn't read it, your mother or your grandmother probably read it, and so you're familiar with those pastimes, and you're familiar with Arjuna's astras and shooting arrows and invoking mantras. And in this verse, Srila Prabhupada, he gave examples of different Kshatriyas and how powerful our weapons were. And he said they would invoke these weapons by, he said, touching water and chanting mantras. And then he said, just like we chant this mantra, Om Apavitro Pavitro Va Sarva Vastam Kato Piva, Yasmaret Pundarikaksham Savayantara Suchihi Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu, Sri Vishnu, which means purified or unpurified, or having passed through all different situations of life. One who remembers Pundarikaksham, the lotus-eyed personality of Godhead, he's cleansed within and without. So if you've been at an initiation ceremony or wedding, you'll see that mantra is always chanted and everyone is touching water and sipping water. So Prabhupada, he explained that and referred to this mantra, Om Apavitro Pavitrova, which we chanted these fire sacrifices. And then Srila Prabhupada said, he said, do not think this is child's play. Do not think this is child's play. So what did that mean? So Prabhupada wanted us to understand that that mantra specifically has great power. Because it's saying you simply remember Pundarikaksham, you're purified within and without. It's a very powerful mantra. And how powerful is that mantra? And we can see by the result. So every time Prabhupada did initiation, or anyone in the disciple succession coming down from Srila Prabhupada and the predecessor to Srila Prabhupada, that mantra would be chanted at initiation and other yagnas. And we see the result was as a very interesting verse that also Prabhupada would quote, in this regard. Yata kanchanatam yati kam syam rasa vidhanata tata diksha vidhanena dvijitam jayate nrinam. As bell metal is turned to gold when mixed with mercury in an alchemical process, so one who is properly trained and initiated by a bona fide spiritual master immediately becomes a Brahmana. So Prabhupada, by invoking the potency of the holy name of this mantra, Om Pavitra Pavitrava, Prabhupada was able to turn bell metal into gold. He was able to turn those of us who were certainly not qualified to be Brahmins, came from very lowly backgrounds, into Vaishnavas. And that is actually something extremely powerful. We cannot imagine that. Many individuals, even Srila Prabhupada said there was something like 600 different translations of Bhagavad Gita, but not one of them made a devotee of Krishna. So somehow the authentic disciplic succession did not come down intact. And people were using the words of Bhagavad Gita to get famous for themselves. They're trying to benefit from the word of Krishna. But Srila Prabhupada, he presented the knowledge as it was, and as Srila Prabhupada said, Krishna simply says, Man manabhava mad bhakto majajimam namaskuru. Just think of me and become my devotee. That simple instruction. So that instruction, Krishna spoke directly to Arjuna, and Sanjaya repeated that to Dhritarashtra. And through the disciple succession, that instruction comes down intact. So we're hearing Krishna speak Bhagavad Gita as it is. Srila Prabhupada said once that if you read and try to understand Bhagavad Gita as it is and come to the same conclusions as Arjuna came to, you will get the same result as Arjuna. You'll become a pure, unallied devotee. So that potency is there because the words are non-different than Krishna. It's coming down in the disciplic succession. So there is actually immense potency. And sometimes we're so close to it we can't see it. Sometimes they say you can't see the forest for the trees. So we're in touch with something extremely pure, potent, and powerful. Does anyone know what the Philosopher's Stone was? The legend of the Philosopher's Stone? What was the Philosopher's Stone?
Basically, you touch it with any metal, it turns it into gold.
That was one concept of the Philosopher's Stone, and there was another concept of the Philosopher's Stone, that if you could find this Philosopher's Stone, you'd become immortal. So you would attain some great wealth, or you'd become immortal. So Srila Prabhupada has actually given us the Philosopher's Stone. This is directly the Philosopher's Stone. Because by reading Bhagavad Gita, we come in contact with the most valuable thing, Krishna. We come in contact with his holy name, Nama Chintamani Krishna. The holy name is like Chintamani. It's like a desire stone that can fulfill all desires. So it's actually the most precious thing. So within Srimad Bhagavatam is that philosopher's stone. If we understand this knowledge, we can attain the greatest wealth, which is the holy name and the attraction for the holy name and the opportunity to engage in devotional service and perfect our lives. That is actually the greatest fortune. So that potency is invested in Srimad Bhagavatam. I remember many years ago, I was reading something about the importance of having intent. Like sometimes you do a sankalpa before you start some journey, and you do a sankalpa first to set your intention. And so intentions can be, even in this world, can be very powerful. So I was reading something about the importance of having intentions when you're making some plan or doing things. And after that, I heard something about how this author who wrote the Harry Potter book, she wasn't actually an author. She had no experience writing books, but she had this desire and intent that she wanted to get kids to read. Somehow her intent was she wanted to get kids to read. She didn't want to make money. That was not her intent. She was a school teacher. She wanted to make kids read. So she started writing this book. And somehow it became so popular that all around the world, millions of kids read this book. Probably many of you read the book. I mean, I heard this about intent. I thought, okay, my kids have the book. I'm going to read one of the books. I started reading the book. I couldn't stop reading it. So her intent was somehow invested in there, this desire to read, and it came out. She became a millionaire. So Prabhupada, he invested his intent in his books for us to come in contact with Krishna. That intent is there in Srila Prabhupada's books. And if we can take advantage of that, we can get that same benefit, that Chintamani stone, that philosopher's stone, that we can come to actually realize Krishna. And so that is the potency that is invested in Srila Prabhupada's books. And also if we look at the power of the holy name, and also the power of the instruction of the acharyas and their orders. Because we understand how Srila Prabhupada, when he first met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, on his very first meeting with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada described, so first time he saw Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta noted that Srila Prabhupada spoke English very well. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said to Srila Prabhupada, at that time, 1911? 22?
No.
I can't remember the year. But anyway, that first meeting, he said, you have English education, you're educated in English language, you should spread the message of Lord Chaitanya in the English language. And Prabhupada had just met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta first. First thing Bhaktisiddhanta says to him is that. And Prabhupada said he went away from that meeting thinking that, Srila Prabhupada said, that was my initiation. And then he formally took initiation, I think it was 11 years later. But 11 years later. And Srila Prabhupada, that first instruction, he very much took that to heart, and for all that time, somehow he was thinking how he could do that. Srila Prabhupada was very much thinking of how he could do that. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had given him that instruction. And so in the instruction of the Guru, there can be great potency. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he recognized that. In Srila Prabhupada, at later times, Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers were saying to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta that, that Srila Prabhupada, Abhay he should move in the temple with the other devotees. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he replied, he will do in his own time. Somehow he saw something in Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada, he took that instruction extremely seriously. And we see in India he preached, and then he eventually took sannyas, and then he really put all his energy into trying to spread the message of Lord Chaitanya. And if you read the Prabhupada Leelamrita, you'll see how in India, it appeared that Prabhupada was struggling. In Jhansi, there was an attempt to open a temple, and it got undermined by some lady who wanted the building. And it seemed like there were so many struggles. But Prabhupada, he was undeterred in his determination to carry out the order of a spiritual master. And then somehow he just kept pushing it to somehow carry out this order of the spiritual master. He translated the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, had it published. Somehow he convinced Sumati Morji to give him a ticket to North America. She told him, Swamiji, you're too old, you will die on the boat, it'll be horrible. And Prabhupada, he would not desist in his determination. So she gave him a ticket, and he came to North America alone with, what was 40 rupees, something like 40 rupees, which I think was worth something like, at that time, $14. So, and Prabhupada ended up in, of course, first he was in Butler at Agarwal's, and then he went to New York, and he went to the Bowery. And the first time I went through New York, we drove through the Bowery trying to find the Brooklyn Temple. And even at that time, the Bowery, I was thinking, you would not want to get out of your car in that area. It just looked so, the word is seedy, drunk people was like, you would not, lots of crime. And that was 1983. In 1977 also, it was a place where many people who were on the street or alcoholics or drug addicts, they lived on the Bowery. And Srila Prabhupada, he described, this is when he was living with Carl Jurgens, that he would have to sometimes step over a drunk person to get into the building where he was staying. So you can imagine that. That's the environment that Prabhupada was in. Just all these drunks and derelict people. It was not a desirable place, to my vision anyway. But Srila Prabhupada described once, at that time, he said he was thinking, this is my home. So home probably means, you're in your parents' house and you can smell what chapati's cooking on a stove and it's warm, and that's nothing like the Bowery being there with like $14. But Prabhupada was thinking, this is my home, and he said, it's my home because this is where my spiritual master, he's ordered me to come here and spread Krishna consciousness in the English language. So Prabhupada had that, excuse me, I'm just kind of moved because we actually went to 26 2nd Avenue, and it was just amazing where Krishna consciousness started. It's this little narrow building. It's probably like half the width of this room, and maybe a little bit longer. And that's where the Krishna consciousness movement started, from this little tiny beginning. So Srila Prabhupada, he just had this unrelentless determination that he was going to somehow or other carry out the order of the spiritual master. That was his only concern. Happiness or distress didn't matter, success or failure. Oh, thank you. No, he was just determined somehow to carry out that order. And at the same time, Srila Prabhupada, he had a vision, because even many years later, some devotees, when the devotees got possession of Prabhupada's room at the Radha Damodar temple, there was a trunk there with some of Prabhupada's possessions. And in that trunk, there was some notes, that Srila Prabhupada had some notes about these plans he had about getting vehicles to spread Krishna consciousness in the West, which actually happened. Devotees got these Sankirtan vans. So Prabhupada, he had a vision that is very difficult to understand. And you probably know this because I think I told this story last time, but I'll tell it again because it really shows the potency of the disciplic succession and Srila Prabhupada's vision. And so Prabhupada actually is, have any of you been to 26 2nd Avenue? person. It's, well, that is, write that on your bucket list. It's a must go, must see. A very powerful place. So Prabhupada, you can hear some of the early lectures there. And in one of those lectures, Srila Prabhupada is speaking how earth, air, fire, water, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego, these are all Krishna's separated energies, material energies, and how actually they're non-different from them. And so all these hippies are sitting on you can go there and see the same wood floors there, they're sitting on that wood floor. And Srila Prabhupada said, after explaining how all the energies are non-different than Krishna, he said, you are not sitting on, he said, you're not sitting on the floor, you're sitting on Krishna. So you're not just sitting on chairs, you're actually sitting on Krishna, because this is Krishna's temple. So just think about that for a moment. You're actually sitting on Krishna. And during that time, very early in the movement, 1965-66, there was a gentleman who worked on the subway, and sometimes he would take us lunch in Union Square and Tompkins Square Park. And he met Srila Prabhupada, and I'm just going to go ahead then come back a few steps. He met Srila Prabhupada over a period of time. Prabhupada talked to him many times, and he told me he thought of becoming a devotee, but he decided to go on a world tour. And one day he said he was sitting on a park bench with Srila Prabhupada, and he said, he told Srila Prabhupada he was going to leave on a world tour. And he said, the Swamiji said to him, one day you will come back to Krishna. So this man, he went on a world tour for a little over 10 years, and during that time he never saw any devotees, no books of Prabhupada's, didn't hear anything about that. And somehow he ended up in Vancouver, in the Vancouver temple. And we just come back from India after Prabhupada's departure, and I went in the temple the first morning we got back, and he was sitting on the prasadam room floor on this prayer mat with I think it's called a yarmulke. No Jewish people here. So he's sitting there. So I naturally thought, I'm just going to tell this man about Srila Prabhupada. And I sat down. I tried to tell him something about Prabhupada, and he said, I met Srila Prabhupada. And I said, please tell me. So he told me the story how he was a bus driver, how he met Prabhupada in the park. And he said very often he would sit in that park, and a couple interesting things he said. He said he always noticed when Srila Prabhupada was in the park, and when he was speaking, he said it appeared like the birds landed in the trees and they were listening to him. And he said the park somehow would become really still, although normally it was kind of windy and there'd be papers blowing around. And he began to tell me how Prabhupada would preach to him. So he started to describe the process of creation, how Krishna, he manifests in one portion of the creation as Karnadaksha Vishnu, and the causal ocean is created, and how there's innumerable universes emanating from his body, and then in each universe, Garbhodaksha Vishnu appears, and then Lord Brahma, and then within the atom is Shirshadaksha Vishnu, and everyone's heart. So he's describing this in great detail. And he hasn't heard anything about Krishna movement for 10 years. And the man started crying, and he said, I can't believe I can remember this after all these years. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. And then he said to me, he knew very well Prabhupada was living in this narrow little building. At that time, there was only a few followers, just a bunch of hippies. And he said, great respect for Prabhupada. And then he said, he's sitting with Prabhupada one day on the bench, and Prabhupada, sorry. It was kind of a really powerful experience for me. And he said, Prabhupada pointed out into the park. Okay, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Yes, Prabhupada said, I have temples and printing presses and farms and disciples all over the world. And this man, Reuben, said he did not know what to think. He said he respected Prabhupada, but Prabhupada had his little narrow, it's like a width of a boxcar, basically. And so he said he didn't know what to think. And then he said Prabhupada pointed out into the park and said, they're simply separated from us by time. And we simply have to move through time and have faith in Krishna. So, I mean, sometimes you hear of people who are visionaries and they have some plans that manifest, and then generally they crumble after some time. Napoleon, all these different conquerors, they had visions of ruling the world. But Prabhupada had this vision that wasn't like a material vision. And Prabhupada said this is something that's simply separated from us by time. So just like right now, we're sitting in Krishna, we're sitting on Krishna. And we're actually sitting in Prabhupada's vision. This is actually something Prabhupada envisioned, that Krishna consciousness would spread all over the world. And we see how Srila Prabhupada, he was so empowered by his spiritual master. He received that instruction through the disciplic succession. He took that to heart, and despite all incredible obstacles and difficulties, and seemingly like nothing would happen in the beginning, there was no result, he just kept pursuing, came to North America, and then, like sometimes it's referred to as the Hare Krishna explosion. And Krishna consciousness, within Prabhupada, the time he was preaching, Krishna consciousness just exploded all over the world in an inconceivable way. And it's continuing to expand in an inconceivable way. We've had the fortune of traveling to over 21 countries the last 15 years. And it's amazing to see how Krishna consciousness is growing, the things that devotees are doing, how many devotees are there all over the world. It's absolutely astounding and amazing. And that's all of that is a part of Srila Prabhupada's vision unfolding. And one of the greatest things about Srila Prabhupada was how he inspired others to engage in Lord Chaitanya's mission. He gave them the holy name, he gave them the taste for chanting, his books, and then he gave us all some part we could play in this mission to spread Krishna consciousness. And so all around the world, some devotees have done little tiny things, some maybe have done bigger things, some have done some little bigger things for the service of Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada's mission and Lord Chaitanya's mission. And now you can see the sum total of all the seva done by all these devotees all over the world. It's actually astounding. And that is the Sankirtan Yagna, that by this congregational chanting and working together and congregationally serving, we see how that ocean expands and just keeps expanding. So all of us are here, and we can all play some little part, even some small part in Prabhupada's mission. Everyone can find one little area that maybe you have some little expertise in one thing, one small thing. And if we all do that, we see how much has happened since Srila Prabhupada started the movement in North America. It's actually astounding. Vancouver Rath Yatra, I remember the first Rath Yatra was a little palanquin. And it evolved into 3 huge carts in the most rich area in Vancouver, in this amazingly beautiful spot, and it served prashadam to over 10,000 people, and but it just started like this little palanquin Rath Yatra in Vancouver. So in that same way, if we all just find some little spot, we can only imagine what the Krishna consciousness movement will look like in another 50 years. We can't imagine. But we all have some little part we can play. And I think a part of that is, as I was saying, sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees. Sometimes it's easy to take for granted what Srila Prabhupada has given to us, such a precious thing, this transcendental knowledge. And appreciating that can give us some some motivation and some determination to see what we can do to pay Srila Prabhupada back for it's kind of like a debt we have, a debt of gratitude. That what can we do to repay Srila Prabhupada for the gifts that he's given us? And that's what Srila Prabhupada, he wanted us to do. There's a big poster when you enter towards the ashrams, the Brahmacharini ashram, and I think it's the treasury, that Prabhupada, he was requesting that we all work together, cooperate together to serve him. And so it's actually our duty as followers of Srila Prabhupada to somehow do what we can to assist Srila Prabhupada in his mission. And also to take advantage of what he's given us, because the more we take advantage of this, the more we can be effective actually in spreading Krishna consciousness and making others Krishna conscious. So I'm going to end there and ask if there's any questions or comments.
You had your voice choked twice in the class, and you did a good job controlling your emotions too. Like, it was very nice. But I just was wondering how do all Prabhupada disciples and devotees like yourself have so much love for Prabhupada? Even that, like, you didn't actually associate, not everyone was associating as much as, like, let's say Tamal Krishna Maharaj or Shruti Giri for some time, who were very, very, like, intimately close, but you're just, like, quite far too, and this is not just your feeling, I've seen that in many. And how can we develop that kind of love for Prabhupada?
Srila Prabhupada, he said once, some reporter asked Prabhupada, what will your followers do after you leave this world? And Prabhupada said, I will not die, I will live forever in my books. And I think we were discussing last night how sometimes devotees, they read Prabhupada's books and something that's just so relevant just comes off the page. So relevant. And I was telling devotees last night also that I had the opportunity to chant japa for Srila Prabhupada in his final days in Vrindavan, sometimes like 14 hours a day, just chanting japa. Like Prabhupada was from me to you, like I was chanting japa. And if you asked me what was it like to be with Srila Prabhupada, I would say, because we asked some devotees yesterday, well, what is it like when you chant your best japa? And they said all the stuff in all your problems kind of poof, just disappear. You feel your mind is concentrated. You feel just the meaning in your life and the fulfillment. And so I told him, that's exactly what you would feel like if you were directly with Prabhupada. That all your problems disappear, your mind becomes peaceful. And when you chant japa attentively, you will feel exactly what it's like to be with Srila Prabhupada. So we can associate with Srila Prabhupada by following his instruction to chant the holy name. And there's immense potency in that. Is it always easy? No, it's not. As Rupa Goswami said, even sometimes it maybe tastes kind of bitter, but it's the medicine that cleanses the heart. And by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, engaging in the process of anartha nivriti, we can get back that taste and come to actually realize and experience how Srila Prabhupada, he is actually, he is embodied in his books, and he was the embodiment of his books. So you have direct opportunity to associate with the founder, Acharya Srila Prabhupada, through his books. They're something very powerful, especially.
Could you advise, like, how can we develop that love also? Of course, reading is one thing. I've seen many devotees reading for years and years. There's something that is special between Prabhupada disciples and Srila Prabhupada. Like, why can not everyone have this?
Takes a few more years, that's all.
Yeah, exactly. I remember Vishnujan Swami, he was like amazing devotee. Came to Vancouver once. His kirtans were just transported to the spiritual world. It was like amazing devotee. And somebody asked him, well, how can I become like you? And he said, well, I've been a devotee I don't know, maybe he was like 10 years, which was a long time then. He said, well, I've been a devotee that long, you've been a devotee for, 2 months. You just have to be a devotee for more years. It's going to fructify. It's going to fructify. The process is there, and by following the process, as we chanted Nasta Preshu Badreshu, all the inauspicious things become practically destroyed to nil, and loving service to the Lord will come into being established as an irrevocable fact. So that's the fruit of the process. We just have to engage in the process with that steadiness and determination. One quick question.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, first of all, for taking us back to Leela Amrita. My question is, whenever we read these few chapters in Leela Amrita, where Prabhupada is struggling alone, and it makes us feel really inspired, and at the same time gives a little bit that we should do more, because Prabhupada did a lot for us. But it stays 1 week, 2 weeks maximum, and then you're again onto your regular schedule. How to have that encouragement? Like now you mentioned, now it's like, oh yes, Prabhupada did that, and then 26th Avenue, that was a whole big struggle how he got there. So how to have that thing that, yes, Prabhupada has done a lot for me, we know that, we acknowledge, but at the same time, now it's my turn to do at least something for Srila Prabhupada. It stays for 2 weeks good after hearing or reading this pastimes, but then it vanishes.
I don't think, well, it vanishes in the sense that we lose sight of it. And I think that's why the importance is to regularly hear and regularly try to understand. And that's what increases our determination. Like in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna tells Krishna the mind is like impossible to control. It's like trying to control low wind. Krishna says, yes, it is. But it's possible by constant practice and detachment. And Srila Prabhupada said the practice is to hear about Krishna, because by hearing about Krishna, we become more attracted to Krishna and more detached from the things that draw us away. So it's a process, and we gradually make advancement. And so sometimes you have to be patient, and sometimes it might seem like you're not making advancement, but from a different perspective, we have been in the material world since time immemorial, in material bodies, 8,400,000 different forms. The spirit soul is revolving through. Finally, you come to human form. You get the Bhakti Lata Bij. Once you've got that Bhakti Lata Bij, you're advancing. It may seem like that Bij is growing slow, but it's a matter of perspective, because sometimes you see these jets flying high in the sky, and you see the contrail. It seems like it's moving very slow. But I had experience of being somewhere where a jet flew like about 100 feet above where we were. And wow, you see how fast it's going. Same speed as the airplane up there, different perspective. So from our perspective, it might seem it's a slow process. We're going through ups and downs and difficulties. But from a different perspective, you can go back to Godhead in one life. And even if it takes 2 or 3, that's just a blip in infinite time. So I'm going to end there. We're over time. Thank you very much. Krishna. Uttama gets a difficult topic. You get the difficult part. That's for sure.